evening. I am Elizabeth Rocheva, Vice President of Strategic Planning and Chief Advancement Officer at Washington Performing Arts. And in a parallel career, I have been a part of the artist roster, have served as a past strategic planning consultant, and am a current advisory board member for Lyric Fest, the extraordinary art song producer-presenter based in Philadelphia. This week, Washington Performing Arts kicks off a multi-month residency centered on Lyric Fest's original production, Cotton, inspired by an extraordinary body of work by artist-photographer John E. Dowell. As a soprano and art song and visual art lover, turned leader in arts management, as a former Philadelphian and a current Washingtonian, I am incredibly excited to invite you inside this project. I want to thank the National Endowment for the Arts for their generous support of our project, which includes a performance of the multimedia work Cotton next week at the Kennedy Center's Terrace Theater, a multi-month educational residency in collaboration with Words, Beats, and Life, the district's only arts education organization exclusively devoted to working with youth around hip-hop and spoken word, and tonight's conversation about the creative process for this multifaceted work. This is a conversation for all ages. A little about how tonight will work. We want to hear from you. Please use the chat function throughout the evening. Right now, let us know where you're tuning in from. Following a conversation between members of our panel, we will field your questions to our panelists. Please just put your questions in the chat as you're listening, and we encourage you to interact regularly, whether you're on Facebook or on our YouTube channel. We'll be curating your questions as best we can through the evening. Cotton, as we will experience it, is the sum of the creative work of many exceptional individuals. One artist-photographer, John E. Dowell, 8 poets, Lauren K. Allain, Charlotte Blake Alston, Mark Bamuthi Joseph, Nikki Giovanni, Trapeta Mason, Glynis Redmond, Afa Michael Weaver, and Alora Young. One producer and filmmaker, Suzanne Duplantis. One composer, Damian Jeter. 2 vocalists, Denise Graves and Justin Austin. 1 pianist, Laura Ward. 1 set designer and a talented technical crew. Wow. We are so fortunate tonight to welcome 3 members of the creative team. They are, as I said, John E. Dowell. Hi, John. Suzanne Duplantis. Hello, Suzanne. Welcome. And Lauren K. Allain. Hello there, Lauren. Hi. They're going to be sharing more about their work throughout the evening. And to guide our exploration, we are so fortunate to welcome a gifted scholar of poetry and poetics from here in our own community. I'm delighted to welcome my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Keith D. Leonard, to the floor. Hi, Keith.
Hello.
Dr. Keith D. Leonard is Associate Professor of Literature at American University and the author of Fettered Genius, the African-American bardic poet from slavery to civil rights. He is also the editor of the forthcoming Cambridge History of African-American Poetry. Keith's publications, presentations, and courses have revolved around his study of political consciousness in African-American poetry and poetics and in hip-hop culture. His current interests include African-American artists in Paris, jazz in African-American culture, and the evolving innovations of Afrofuturism. Welcome, Keith. Over to you.
Thank you so very much, Elizabeth. And thank you to the Washington Performing Arts and Lyric Fest for this wonderful artistic production. I have the honor and the privilege to be in conversation with these 3 key figures in the development and mounting of this fantastic collaboration. We will take this opportunity tonight to peek a little behind the scenes at these artists at work. We will gather their insights about how they came together for this project, some of the ways in which it was developed, and their senses of its beauties and its aims. I'm excited and grateful that you can join us in this unique opportunity for a special preview to what promises to be an awe-inspiring show. Allow me then to introduce our special guests a bit more fully. John E. Dowell Jr. is a nationally recognized artist who captures the pulse of cities and agricultural landscapes of America in his large-scale photographs. An artist and a master printmaker for more than 4 decades, Dowell has fine art prints, paintings, and photographs that have been featured in more than 50 one-person exhibitions and represented in the permanent collections of 70 museums and public collections. Among them are the Museum of Modern Art and the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, and the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris, France. John Dowell is a Philadelphia native and professor emeritus of printmaking at the Tyler School of Art at Temple University. Welcome, John, and thank you so much for joining us. Next, I would like to introduce Suzanne Duplantis. Mezzo-soprano, curator, producer, and visual artist, Suzanne is a co-founder and co-artistic director of Lyric Fest, which celebrates its 20th anniversary this season. Lyric Fest's mission is to bring people together through story and song. In addition to producing uniquely rich performances of song in varied settings throughout Philadelphia region, Lyric Fest has commissioned more than 200 songs and 17 song cycles from more than 36 composers since its inception. Her career in opera spanned decades with companies across America in oratorio, chamber music, and song. Suzanne has appeared with many of the Philadelphia's premier music organizations, often premiering new works written especially for her. Welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
And last, but not at all least, I welcome Lauren K. Allain, who is the author of 2 poetry collections, Difficult Fruit in 2014 and Honeyfish in 2019, as well as 2 chapbooks, smaller poetry collections, Dawn in the Catskills from 2008 and Unbecoming Gretel in 2022. She has been the co-editor of Furious Flower, Seeding the Future of African American Poetry in 2020, and she is the executive director of the Furious Flower Poetry Center and associate professor of English at James Madison University. A recipient of several honors in the field, her work has appeared in numerous publications, including the New York Times, The Atlantic, Ms. Muse, Tin House, and the Caribbean Writer, among others. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you all.
And I would like our conversation to begin, I think, where it all began, so to speak, which is the photography of John Dowell. John, when you've been asked about the Cotton Project, you have often shared a story about how you were called to visit South Carolina cotton fields in a dream, which led you to beginning this work. So please, if you would, share more about that story and give us a sense of how this photographic odyssey got started.
Well, I had an exhibition scheduled for the Fellatier Museum in Atlanta, in Savannah. And 4 months before I started dreaming about my grandmother, she'd been dead for like 45 years, 46 years. So I have 4 sisters and a brother. And after the second dream, I asked them, had they been dreaming? And they said no. And after the third dream, one sister said, you're in trouble because Big Mommy didn't play, so you better find out what it's about. So a lot of thinking, and I started coming back to the story she used to tell me about cotton. So I contacted a farm agent for Savannah, and I met a farmer, and I went out and had my first experience of actually seeing cotton up close and actually feeling it, which was strange. I mean, you've seen it in books, but not the real deal. So he took me around and showed me a lot of things, and he tried to impress me with showing me how to cut it up and stuff. And his daughter said, he's not a botanist, Dad. He just wants to photograph, so leave him alone. So anyway, it went through the day, and then halfway around noon, he said, let's have a little lunch. We had a little lunch, and he started telling me that this property had been in his family for 7 generations. And so that took me out because I felt my grandmother had taken me home. So this is how it all began. And I started photographing at first just recording what I could see and stuff. And of course, space, light, color, shadow and stuff. And then it became personal. Like I started seeing things and I started imagining what would I have done if I had to experience this? What was going to happen to me? And so I started shooting these photographs, and a lot of the photographs was about what I couldn't see, but I could feel. And so that's how it started, you know.
As you developed your project, how did you decide on putting different photographs together, combining the agricultural with the urban? Tell us a bit more about how you developed your vision.
Well, that happened on two occasions. Well, one, just being in the cotton and getting ideas about that. And there's pieces I made called Ghost Cotton and Don't Pass the Red Line and stuff. They're sort of like political statements. But in 2017, my wife and I were at the Historical Society, and I saw a book on the shelf that said Slavery in New York City. And I stopped in my tracks, and the woman says, "Is this for real, or are y'all playing and stuff?" And she said, "Well," I said, "I've been down south risking my life, going to take, photographs of cotton and stuff, because, it's not like hanging out in Harlem." So I started getting a lot of information. So I found out about Seneca Village. I found out a lot about Washington Square, the things like that. And so a lot of information. So I started making building images around this, trying to show the past and the present at the same time. So I started using cotton in a lot of places, and I've put cotton on 125th Street in Harlem, as well as downtown, and and a lot in Central Park. So it sort of evolved. It was like an evolution of things, and it was really so interesting to me. And I ran into a lot of stories and stuff. So I can keep going on, but other people have to talk.
So we're here to talk about your collaboration with Lyric Fest. So
Yes.
Tell us a bit about what interested you in working with Lyric Fest to get this collaboration together.
Well, I'm an artist, and somebody walked up to me and said they're really interested in my work. I said, "Oh, really?" And they said, well, we're gonna do some songs. You gonna do what? And then eventually he said, "We're gonna get some poets." I said, "Okay, all right, yeah, you do it." Okay, she's giving me the thing. And then she came back and said, "Well, yes, they're all interested." I said, "You're kidding?" He said, "They all love your work." "Oh, they do? Okay. Well, let's ride with this and see where it's going to go." So that's how the collaboration came about. And Suzanne is persistent. You know what I mean? I mentioned, yeah, okay. And then I get a call. I'd see her in church, and I had to deal with her. But it was it was a good experience. What can I tell you?
Suzanne, can you tell us a bit more about how this project originated for you? What did you see in John's work that suggested to you this kind of broad-scale collaboration?
I have to say who could not love John, first of all? but also, he first told me about it. He first told me about his story, like he just told you all. And that story captured my imagination, captured my fancy. Being visited in a dream by your grandmother, who had been dead for over 40 years. I just was very intrigued by that. And then he told me about his work, and then told me about placing cotton into the columns of Wall Street buildings, and allowing the viewer at a glance to make connections that maybe had never been made, like it had not been made to me in that way, that the wealth of this nation, the people who are wealthy in this nation, owe it, obviously, but that kind of connection between the wealth and the cotton industry and the people who suffered and were enslaved to build that kind of wealth. For John to have been able to capture that at a glance, I think is part of his gift. I told him yesterday I thought he was a genius. It's more than being a genius. It's an artist, and it's a particular sensitivity. So his sensitivity attracted me. His work is arresting, and his story was arresting. So being in this field of curating art song concerts and really wanting, it's not just song, it's telling stories, and it's building connections with people and between story and lives and how all of that comes together. I thought that John's work was perfect to as a launching pad to go in many different directions. At first I don't know if there's a follow-up question about the poets, but that's just one of the most exciting aspects of this project, because at first, when we had the launching pad of John's work, we were thinking, well, maybe we can find some poetry that already exists that maybe could work with what John is doing. And the more we thought about it, the more we thought, no, we really need to commission new work, fresh work. And I really believe that these poets will see this. They'll see his poetic expression, and they'll be inspired. I knew that would happen, and that is what happened. I sent it to many people, and it was both. We sent both the images and John's story and John's reason for creating the pieces that he created, and this visual poetry that he has. And everyone was very, very enthusiastic. I think we could have gotten easily 50 poets. We limited it to 8. So anyway, that's how it all was. And we didn't know in the very beginning how it was all going to play out, but we knew it was right. We knew it was a gut feeling of this is right. We just keep moving. So.
I was curious because you had mentioned before that you hadn't commissioned poets before, that you had used pre-existing poems. So can you say a little bit more about how you feel like that has enhanced this particular project?
It's everything. It is everything. It's not appropriate for every project because we don't have the budget to do it for every project. I wish we did. But Art Song exists already. One of the things unique about Lyric Fest is that we combine in the same program usually modern American art song with Schubert songs and Bach and jazz, and we put it all together typically in a concert. This is a special thing that we're doing here, and so just to be able to do that, it really has opened a new avenue for us. Maybe we want to do more of this. It's not necessarily in our mission statement, but I don't know why it couldn't be, actually, because it's so it's just such a partnership. It's such a rich way of bringing worlds together and communities together. The whole community of poets and writers and aficionados of all of our various art forms to be able to pull all of that together is thrilling and community building. It makes everything come together. All these different worlds notice their common threads and commonalities. I don't know if I answered the question.
Absolutely. It sounds so wonderful, this idea of community building and collaboration. And I'm glad that we have one of the poets who was commissioned to write the poems here on our panel. And I would love if Lauren would share a bit about her participation in this project, what brought her to it. She wrote her poem in response to the image, They Took My Sister. But before we get into that, can you just tell us what interested you in the program in the first place?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I heard about Lyric Fest because they approached me to use a pre-existing poem for a previous program, a poem I wrote for Sandra Bland for their Say Her Name project. And, that was wonderful and exciting. And it's something to write a poem and then to just see the life it has, right? that and so it got embedded in this wonderful and really meaningful piece and experience, and so that began a conversation. I think with this particular project, when we talked about it a couple of times, the opportunity to be in conversation. I mean, half the reason I write is because I need somebody to talk to, and sometimes it's myself, but to be in conversation with the work, and the work was so evocative. It was just, it was a great opportunity. And I felt too that to me, arts are always in conversation, right? We just access these different points. Visual art accesses something that's different than music, that accesses something that's different in language, and to then be able to corral all of those pieces together. The word that I'm fond of these days is alchemy, right? That it alchemizes in a way that everything on its own is powerful and does great work, but then the combination really creates a portal for something else to happen. And I'm excited to see what that something is. Oops, you're on mute.
As I mentioned, you responded to the image, "They Took My Sister." Can you tell us what sparked your imagination with that image?
Okay, John, I'm going to confess. It was the title. The language really snagged me. I'm very close to my younger sister. And, I feel like I always am attracted to stories of sisters or siblings. But one of the things so I saw that, and it immediately snagged my attention. And I read the story of the watch night, and it was the second time that sort of panic of like, oh my God, if I were alive in these times and this happened, like you were saying, what would I do? The other was reading, it's a novel, that The Invention of Wings, that also chronicles these sisters. And I listened to that with my sister, the audiobook, which is a wonderful listen, by the way. And we were both like, oh man, I was like, you would be handful. You'd be the one in trouble, and I'd be the one trying to like save your ass all the time. Oops, kids. But so we've talked about that just in a completely abstract, different way. But when I saw the title, but then the image was so, what's the word I want? It was compelling, right? It looked singular, but like the close reveal is that it's not a single thing, right? And that's sort of sisterhood, and that's sort of what started the poem, right? Of like, and one of the realizations, again, I love poems because they like make you think of weird things, and art in general, because I probably wouldn't have written this poem or thought about this, but I was like, relationally, like there's something with sister and brother, right? That's equal, right? You're my sister and I'm your sister, right? So there is a bond there that is, I think, special and unique, and that this poem allowed me to just think about that, and an image allowed me to sort of craft around it to make the poem.
I hope you don't mind my putting you on the spot. I would love it if you could please read that poem if you have it handy.
I have pulled it up because I suspected. They took my sister. Night lacks the shadow of her face. Unwhispering, the air mourns her sleep's unguarded breath. There is empty where was her sister, a song turned a cavern of sorrow. Sister, a dirt road my feet hunger for. Before she came, Moonchild, I was a complete and solitary thing, the unsistered system of myself. Sister, a world we made for each other. Sister, an anchor in history's unforgiving sea. Will I know myself without the gravity of her pulling me like a willful sun? Come the cotton bright morning, how can she, sister, my phantom heart, be gone?
Thank you so much for sharing. What a moving engagement with that image. I'm struck by the kind of mournfulness of it, the confrontation with that loss. I know that in certain moments, John has talked about wanting the Cotton series to be about sort of claiming African Americans, claiming some of the resilience of our ancestors. And I'm always struck by thinking about the role of mourning and grieving in trying to claim that resilience. Can you talk about a little bit more about that mournfulness in your thinking of in that poem?
I think I have to fess up first. Y'all picked me, and I'm a very elegant poet. If my mom's watching, she's like, "Where's the happy poems?" My sister has said that to me. She's like, "If anything happens to me, can you write a happy poem?" But so that's just the choice of poet to start with, right? But again, that image was on the screen just now, and there's a luminosity that is in the cotton in that moment that is illuminating the dark, right? And so to me, the notion of like the blood, the bonds of blood that provided, in unspeakable horror, right? Some sort of light. And then to have that light go out, right? The watch night, the night before the sale, the night before the shipping over to another plantation or another country, like, ooh, that extinguishing felt also unimaginable to me.
Thank you for that lovely illumination. I know that John has sometimes offered commentary on his own images. And John, would you mind sharing a little bit about how you put that image together and also some of your ideas about what moved you to create it in this way?
Well, I had experienced several years in a row watch night. And that was, for some reason, that really got to me. That, my sisters, my mama could go, And first of all, in 2019, I went back to Hobgood, North Carolina to photograph at night. And David Mayer, the farmer there, says he's going to bring me lights. And I said, no. I got to go out. I got to be in the dark to shoot. He said, why can you get anything shooting in the dark? And I just said, well, we had long exposures and stuff. And so those experiences were a lot stronger emotionally than when I photographed in the daytime. The daytime, many times I'd look up a field and I swear I could see people. But at nighttime, you could hear, you can feel, it was the whole thing. In fact, my wife said, I'm getting in the car, I'll see you when you come back, But anyway, that was very powerful for me. And so when I saw this particular image, because I photographed it, and sometimes with the moon and some things, you can get some weird things happen and like that. And so I saw it and I start working on it and bringing it down and so, and it really, for me, started creating that feeling that I felt when I felt a lot about, watch night. And so I was just trying to convey that to get that feeling. That's all,
That's so beautiful and moving, and imagining the ghostly sounds of a cotton field at night. What a powerful way to amplify what's going on in that image. Thank you. At this point, I had planned on asking Suzanne a bit more about how the music goes together with the poetry and the images. But before we do that, I don't know, if Suzanne, if you wanted to share some observations about the image, They Took My Sister. Do you have an experience of that image?
I have a very strong reaction to that image. It's hanging in the cathedral right now as part of John's exhibit that one can enjoy before the concert or anytime. But it's the one. Even John has told me. He said a lot of people respond to that work, and it is. I've said it before. It's arresting. It is absolutely gorgeous to see in person, especially. It's beautiful, I'm sure, here. But when you see it, the chroma, the blacks that John uses in his photographs are velvety, and the white in this is just it's a precious thing, this one blossom. It's so precious. And, the fact that it's in relief against all of this dark, there it is. And you see how vulnerable it is, and that it's this precious thing that's going to be taken away. It's just, it's just so moving. In the way that we put it together with Lauren hasn't seen her video animation yet, but we start with, I'll give it away here, but you won't be seeing it anyway, but we start with the blossoms sort of in regular shape. And as she reads her whole poem, it just recedes until it disappears.
Wow. That's a really powerful way to imagine putting the poems and the images together. So can you say a bit more about how that has worked, how the poems have been turned to music, some of the other composers, and also give those who are watching a sense of what they might experience if they were to attend the show?
Yeah, well, John he didn't mention this particular thing, but he's taken over 15,000 images of cotton over the years. And with that, he's created, constantly evolving images. There was one that I was using, in the beginning of making these video animations. And I said, John, I have a really poor copy of this particular photo. Where is it? I can't find it. I can't find it in high res version. He said, oh, I got rid of that one. I made a better one. So it's always evolving. So what I started to do throughout this process is pull from all of his cotton work. The poets each chose a theme and an image, and they wrote on that theme and image. And it was, some of us at Lyric Fest were saying, well, what if two poets choose the same one? Maybe we should tell the poets what to do. We're like, no, we'll give them all of this and see what inspires them. And not a single poet went for the same thing. We had a choice of maybe 11 or 12 themes that John had come up with in his writing about those themes, his words, as Lauren said, and the image put together. And so anyway, some of the songs, so for each poem, there is the poet's reading, and then there's the song itself. So both of those are animated with video. The poems, as the poets read them, they're typically a minute, maybe even less than a minute, to 2.5, 3 minutes, at max, maybe 4 minutes for some of them. But so that's a long time to animate. And, John and I were talking about it. He said, well, I don't, he kept saying, I don't want people to get bored looking at, just looking at an image. And I knew that they would never get bored, but that there's a world inside of these poems. There's a world of expression and of emotion. And so I felt that, my task was to tell that story visually with his work, even if it wasn't from it wasn't simply from the actual piece that they were basing it on. I could pull in other things because the imagination of the poets go in many different directions in the course of the poem. So it was a wonderful challenge and opportunity to get to know so much of his work. And, read these poems, listen to these poets, listen to the songs, read them again and again and again. I told John, many are the times that I just sat in front of my computer and just wept, over the poems and the music and John's work. And just finding a way to put them all together so that the storytelling was there and the visual impact would be there. So when you come to the performance, the screens that you'll be seeing the poets and the work on are very, very large. They're about 10. The center screen is about 10 by 16. At the Kennedy Center, we might have smaller screens on the side, but you can see this striking image, just to have a scale. That's the center screen that you see Alora on is a 10 by 16, and then there's two flanked by two 10 by 16s, and those have different animation. And at the angle that you're seeing that, you're just not seeing those side animations. But in another photo that I took, there's all of us taking a picture of that because it's so amazing to see. It's epic. It's huge, and I would say that it feels like what it feels like to take in this work. It's a scale that really is large enough to speak about this work. So,
and she kept all the clarity. It's clean.
It is very clean.
Even though it's large, it's all in focus. Yes.
Yeah.
And as I understand it, that image is from Alora Young's poem, "The Night Before the Run." Can you say a little bit about her and about the poem that she wrote for that image?
The Night Before the Run, I'm going to talk about John's work first. The Night Before the Run, I want to say it's a 16-foot long piece, John?
Yes. 16.
It's a 16-foot long piece. And this is John's interpretation of what he would be dreaming about the night before he would have decided to run. So, and the other thing that was so fascinating to me about this when he first told me is that he said, visual artists, we don't have the element of time in our art. Musicians do, poets, you read something across time, you sing across time, you look at something like that. So he wanted to introduce the element of time into his art. And so this piece is meant to be experienced as you walk through it, and it tells its story as you're walking through it. So, this animation was really very straightforward. Alora, it was our youngest poet. She probably wrote the poem when she was maybe 18, maybe 17. This was years ago. We had heard Laura, my colleague, had heard her on the radio. She was one of the finalists for the National Poet Laureate, Youth Poet Laureate. And she read a poem on the radio, and Laura immediately came to me and said, wow, this incredible young poet is coming to Swarthmore near Philadelphia. We have to invite her. And she actually came and read on one of our concerts for us in that first season that she was there. And she wrote, she read some of her poems. We did a poem, something called The Time to Mourn. It was for mourning the losses from COVID. And she had lost her uncle. And she wrote this poem about that. And so she came and read it for us. And she was our poet for the evening. So she interspersed a whole bunch of poetry that she read for us in between songs. So anyway, so we knew Alora, we wanted her to write for us. We sent her all the stuff. She immediately chose that work, and within 3 days delivered a 4-page poem that was, I don't know how to describe it. It's, I don't know, John and I were both just floored. We were absolutely floored. It starts so, that night I dreamed of lilies, it's just absolutely beautiful. So I don't know if we're going to be able to hear a little bit of that. Are we going to hear that, Elizabeth? Okay.
Yes, I think we can hear a little bit of that performance.
The escape from tyranny is often an arduous task. It comes not without bloodshed and never without cause. Thomas Paine. That night I dreamt of daylilies, fresh picked, battered, and then lard fried. Sweetest morsels of the forest, the kind of treat we had to hide. In the north they will ignore us as we do freely imbibe. Heard they ain't got cotton, just snow. They say it falls quickly from the sky in the deep white north, cool as ice in the river when it runs fresh and cold. What I wouldn't give to see real snow. No specks of green with spines that always prickin', no gruff sharp words that tell you it need pickin', no old man with hands always a-takin' what shouldn't belong. where my family can stay and don't gotta stay gone. To see the beauty of winter without the fear of being split forever, making up their money with our pain. We're leaving this place because the angels are coming. Find your way home out of a field of cotton. How do you find your way home out of a field of cotton? Learning to read.
Poems. So we handed the poems over to him and put him in touch with all of the poets, because I'm sure it's kind of it's hard to say, okay, what we said was, to the poets, you write the poem the length that you want to write it. You write whatever you want to write. We will put that, that will be a part of the presentation that we show. But then please know that the composer, we have to have practical concerns. The composer will likely set just a portion of this as a song. So he communicated with all the poets and decided, maybe together, or he decided an arc for the whole cycle, where we would start, where we would end, and where he wants to take us emotionally. He came up with a beautiful arc for the concert. Lots of different, just lots of different angles, and like a prism looking in all different directions. And so then he came up with a beautiful cycle of 8 songs. And interestingly, Lauren's poem, I think when you read it, it's about a minute. How Lauren, I think, and her song is about 4.5 or 5 minutes. So the music really, stretches this feeling out over a very long time. And he has at his disposal, of course, all the colors in the piano, and all the colors of the voice, and all the colors of the language, all of those things. And the artistry of the performers, I have to mention, is extraordinary. So, yeah. So that's putting it all together. I don't know if I covered what you wanted me to cover.
I'm sorry. Can you tell us a bit more about who the performers are and how they've been participating?
I can. Denise Graves is our mezzo-soprano, and she, of course, needs no introduction. She's an absolutely phenomenal artist. And she and my colleague, Laura Ward, who's a co-founding artistic director with me. Laura's a fantastic, phenomenal pianist, and she and Denise have been very good friends, and they've been concertizing together for 10 years. And so we obviously thought of Denise for this project right away. And we also have been so blessed to have Justin Austin with us. And he is another truly gifted, beautiful baritone with such a heart, and in a way of in a very open, vulnerable way in performing to really give over to these songs. I hope he doesn't get upset with me, but he said to Laura the other night that he just had to step off and have a good cry about one of the poems that he was singing. And it's kind of like that. They're really into it. They think the whole project is pretty unique and an incredible thing that's all come together. So, and Laura's bringing it all together on the keyboard. So
it sounds such a wonderful, amazing collaboration. I'm so excited to see it all in action. Just getting that little snippet of Alora with the image behind her and trying to imagine a singer singing to make you weep. It's so powerful. And I have a question that I would like to start with you, Suzanne, but I hope that John and Lauren would join in. Mentioning Alora and her being the Youth Poet Laureate reminds me that in the Philadelphia performance, there's going to be a dress rehearsal for youth in Philadelphia and that they'll be able to attend for free. And here in DC, we have the residency in collaboration with Words, Beats, and Life. And I think about the history that cotton symbolizes. And for some of these young people who I'm sure know this history, it might seem quite distant. And I can imagine even for some of us adults, there's a way in which that its history is distant. So I'm curious for you all to comment, all three of you, in your own way about what is it about this particular history that is evoked by cotton and John's images that you think you want to bring back alive? What is the power of that story for you? Suzanne, can you start for us, please?
Well, interestingly, one of the schools that I approached, I said, we're doing this project. I had a history with that school because my kids had gone. It's a public school, a music magnet public school in Philadelphia, and I'd say it's about 50% African American. And so when I was talking to the teachers, one of them said, our kids have really been traumatized over the past several years. And so is there anything that you can give us? We want them to come to this, but is there anything that you can give us that can help them to prepare for what they're going to see? Like they didn't know, like the adults knew that this was going to potentially be, emotional and hard to take. And so, like we want to protect them. We want to make sure that they're prepared for this. So I wrote the poets and asked if we could share, some of the poems and some of the, John's video of him walking through his exhibit. So I don't know. I mean, from my perspective, it's very timely. It's one of John's pieces is called "Still on the Plantation," and it's I feel like it's a timely subject, and it's history, and it's American history. It's not just African American history. It's our history, and so it's important that all of us learn about it and go there. That's my feeling, anyway.
Lauren, how would you respond to that?
I would say that one of the joys and power of art is that it is a disrespecter of time. If the work evokes what it's supposed to evoke, then we find ourselves in that moment, sitting in 2021, looking at that cotton image takes me to a place and to a history, blood memory, whatever we want to call it, but right, that allowed connection, right? And so I think that we're not asking folks to know about history. We're asking them to experience it and to maybe experience it differently than they do in their textbooks or in lectures or in classes, and to experience it on a visceral limbic level. Right. And so I think, I am an educator. I want folks to learn, but I think that poetry in particular, but art in general, is interior work. And that what we're really offering is an opportunity to be moved, right? To have an experience that your body isn't moving, but things inside you are, right? That's what art gets to do.
Well, for me, I always say that I need the viewer to complete my work. My job is to put a stimulus there that can bring them to realize something about themselves. I don't know exactly what it is, that they're going to experience, but my job is to bring something. And just before I retired from teaching, I had a photograph of a cotton hanging in my office. And a Black student walked in and said, "Well, what's that?" I said, "It's cotton." He said, "What's the big deal about cotton?" I couldn't say anything. I was just like knocked out. And I got through to him after a couple of weeks, but it took me a minute to get myself together because I was so shocked. But the other thing is that I like if a viewer can reflect on the power that it took for people to overcome this. But it's beautiful. It's a beautiful plant. But, you know, it produced such a horror in things. But you know, I didn't want to do no photographs of lynchings or anything like that. I wanted to come from this other way, you know, this of the light and the space going off into the distance. And I got a couple of pictures that friends of mine look at it and they swear there are people out there picking. It's just the cotton.
That's so powerful. As I was looking at some of your images, I was struck by the beauty of the cotton plant itself. And I was reminded of stories I read about how difficult it was to harvest the cotton. And you can see the texture of the plant in some of those images, as well as the beauty. And I'm really glad that you mentioned that part of like the plant itself and its beauty and its texture, not just its symbolism, but what it physically is. And I thank you for bringing that into those photographs. I would like to ask you, John, one more question, and then hopefully those of you who are listening, you have some questions to share with us, and we can begin to have you participate in this conversation. What you were saying, John, reminded me of your description of what you called the soft, dangerous beauty of the past. I love that line. And do you mind sharing some of what you had in mind with that description?
Well, and they were asking me, you know, well, what is this work about? And it's soft and beautiful, but it was dangerous. When I was photographing in the South, at least half of the times I was accompanied by a farm agent. And most of the time they would not leave. They stayed with me and my wife. And I said, well, you can go off. And they said, oh, no, we're going to stay. No. And Francis looked at me and said, I'm glad he's staying. So it was quite an experience, you know.
Thank you very much. I just love the idea of the softness and the danger and the beauty of that past coexisting. And so much of the collaboration that we've heard described seems to convey so much of that interaction and gives us an opportunity to have that kind of reflection about how we relate to that past, how present it is in our lives, and what it moves within us. So thank you all. I am sure that there are other questions out there from people who are watching. Elizabeth, are there questions that we should be responding to?
Sure. Thanks, Keith. I have one question for everyone. It's not actually directed to a specific person, but it's, what was unexpected for you about this particular collaborative process? You know, was there something unexpected that emerged for you artistically in working on cotton?
I am laughing because my thought, as I listened to Alora and heard the story of the 3-day poem, what I didn't know was I could write a poem that fast. You know, and I'm laughing because one of the things I did in preparation for tonight was kind of look at some early drafts. And so for me, fast was having written the first brainstorm of this like a month and a half before it was due, right? And so I'm not a 6 week poem girl, usually. And so what it told, but I will also say I had the image as my screensaver the moment I picked it. And I stared at it and stared at it and stared at it like so there's also the sense that the poem had been percolating, right? And that it sort of, when I was ready for it, it sort of popped out. But that was I was grateful and surprised.
Thank you. Suzanne or John, would you like to respond to that question of something unexpected?
Yeah, it was like my assistant said today when he said, like, wow, y'all did it. You did it. It's one thing to talk about an idea and you think it's going to come and you know some of the components, but when you put it all together, the way Suzanne put that thing together, I was in rehearsal the other night, I cried, And so that is just unbelievable. That's all I can say. I mean, 3 years ago, I could never foreseen this. That's all I can tell you.
Well, it's kind of the same. And we were talking with the lighting designer yesterday, and we were just kind of taking a minute and looking at all of this. And he said it's amazing to me when we sat in that room 3 years ago and thought about what this could be, and here it is. It's the same thing John said. It was just, this feeling of being. I definitely felt that we were being led. That this was supposed to be, and we just had to keep moving forward and keep writing the grants and keep, and putting all the pieces together and and just not be dissuaded, not take no for an answer, and just keep going, and here we are. We've reached the day.
Love it. Thank you each for sharing that.
And Suzanne, you were talking about earlier about how the composer had all of the colors of the piano and the colors of the human voice. And one of the questioners offered a question that invites you to elaborate a bit more about that. Talk more about how the composer bring imagery and words to life through music. How can you talk about how that worked through sound?
Sure. Well, if the medium is art song, so it's as simple as voice and piano. Damien has what I've described as a big, open American art song sound. That's what he's created for us. He's also a beautiful singer himself, and so he has an innate understanding of the human voice, and so he writes very beautifully for the human voice. He's not shy about using melody, and that might sound funny to people out of the world of music, but in the 20th century, we went through some time where melody was definitely on the outs, and it was not. Yes. But melody is back, which is not to say that it's not. Which is not to say that you're not going to hear new modern sounds, because you are going to hear new modern sounds, and they're the sounds that the palette of colors that he's using are very much pointed and for effect. He also is using quotes, musical quotes, and if for those of you who don't know, this might be a little bit of a spiritual, a little bit of an American patriotic song. In fact, the whole cycle starts with it starts with these chords, and he plays the tune of "My Country, 'Tis of Thee, Sweet Land of Liberty." But the chords that you hear make it very clear that something is wrong. That he's harmonizing this tune that we all know and we recognize in a very dark way. And that's your entry into the cycle. And his use of beautiful big dramatic lines that are warm and inviting, that shift on a dime, and all of a sudden it becomes it becomes dark, as if the poem goes that way. He's gonna do that with the music. He also beautifully uses silence, which is so much a wonderful part of music. He uses that very, very well. He uses the range of the voice very, very well. The pieces for mezzo go, and Denise has an absolutely glorious low register, and so I can't even sing one of the notes that's written in. I'm a mezzo, and I don't have that note. I don't know if it's I don't remember if it's a low E or a low F, and but at a very appropriate moment, she sings this big, gorgeous low note. And then for the baritone, some very, very, very high notes there that he's using. And he also uses a tune. I don't know if this is a borrowed tune or what we call whatever I called it before. I forget. Anyway, I don't know if this is a tune that he made up or that if it comes from a song that I don't know. But the singer sings the whole song, and at the end sings in falsetto, which for a baritone is a high, is singing in the female octave, the female range. And usually in a baritone voice, it's a very hollow, haunting sound. And so you go through the whole song, and then at the very end, he just sings this heartbreaking melody that's like a lament from the deepest place in you. And he is singing it up in this female, otherworldly voice. It's a stunning moment in the work. So there's just little moments of jazzy things. He's just combining everything in his toolbox to express these poems, and very uniquely one from another, I must say. So,
wow, what a lovely description about such a complex representation that it's really awe-inspiring to hear that description. We have another question from the audience that is at least in the first instance for John and Lauren. So Lauren, I'll ask you to take it first. The question is, has working on this project inspired new ideas for future works, and what might those be?
Yes.
Oh, go ahead. Good. I'll let John go first because he's got a yes.
Yeah, well, we're always turning it over, and one project and an idea gets picked up and carried into another part of an idea, and so I'm continuing to progress and stuff, and I'm dealing with a lot of spirits. I'm dealing with spirits, the ancestors and spirits and stuff, and I've been for a while working on how to show what is not there, and so and it's coming along. I got some more things in progress.
Sounds wonderful. Something to look forward to for sure.
Yeah.
Lauren, what were you going to say?
I'm just going to need John to keep providing me with photographs. No, I mean, I feel like this was a unique, it was definitely a singular moment and a singular poem. So I was grateful though, because as you mentioned, I'm executive director over at Furious Flower, which is a new position. And I've, with taking on admin stuff in the last, even as assistant director, which I was for 6 years prior, I hadn't been writing a whole lot, which was the other reason I was a little panicky about if this poem was even going to happen, And so I think for me, what that writing that poem actually reminded me of why I write, and sort of kicked me back to the page, nothing like a deadline to get the juices flowing sometimes. It's not always the muse, y'all. The deadline is the muse sometimes. And but then once released of the deadline, that surge of like, oh, this is what brings me to the page lingered. And so I'm really grateful that that happened.
And Suzanne, please share what's next for you in Lyric Fest, perhaps in this vein, perhaps not.
Yeah, well, we have the rest of the season ahead of us, and we're already thinking of next season. And in fact, I have to say this did open our minds to look for living American poets, and we have a friend that we know in Philadelphia who's a very beautiful poet, and she sends us Christmas poems every year. And so we are intrigued about doing something with these Christmas winter poems. And so we might be looking at that soon. So I'll let you know when more plans are made.
Well, thank you all very much for your wonderful insights about this wonderful project. It's so exciting to hear artists' collaborations and describe so well what you all are doing. And this project, which is touching upon such an important history and such an important role of that history, its legacies in our present. So I am so excited to get a chance to see what this performance will look like. So thank you all very much for your input. And I think at this point, it's time for me to turn things over to Elizabeth.
Thanks so much, Keith. And thanks again to you, Lauren, John, Suzanne. Thanks to all four of you. To quote Lauren, the alchemy of art, it's a magical thing. And I'm more excited than ever to experience this exceptional evening of artistry, actually twice for me in the next week. Your insights, and again, Keith, for your expert moderation. This is such a gifted group. I also want to thank the legion of other artists involved with the project who aren't here in our conversation tonight, but whose work you'll get to experience, and also all of the talented folks behind the scenes at both Lyric Fest and Washington Performing Arts who work so hard to help the work be brought to the stage and be experienced by so many people. For those of you at home, I know that I speak for my colleagues here and at Washington Performing Arts and Lyric Fest when I say how much we hope you will join us to experience Cotton in just a few days. You can purchase tickets to Saturday's performance in Philadelphia at the Lyric Fest website and here in Washington at washingtonperformingarts.org. And I can share with you some details about those performances. They'll be popping on the screen in just a moment. There you go. So visit those websites this Saturday, February 25th in Philadelphia, and then next Tuesday, February 28th at the Terrace Theater at the Kennedy Center. And I happen to know that both performances are very nearly sold out. So if you have not yet bought your tickets, you really should as soon as you conclude this viewing. And Washingtonians, I want to invite you to watch your inboxes this spring. Our educational residency with Words, Beats, and Life will include a radio program, an online literary magazine, and a live performance featuring local youth poets' interpretations and responses to more of Mr. Dell's cotton photography. Thanks again to the National Endowment for the Arts for making this residency and Washington Performing Arts and Lyric Fest presentations of Cotton possible, along with many wonderful individual sponsors that are bringing the performance to life. Thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate you joining us online as we delve into the story behind the art on stage. And we can't wait to see you in person very soon. Good night.